toward a culture of peace. We're very honored to have Dame Anita Roddick today to talk about corporate social responsibility and community trade. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, may I take this opportunity before the lecture starts to inform you of today's program and other information. Today's lecture will start at 2 o'clock and will be conducted in English for approximately 16 minutes. This will be followed by a 15-minute question and answer session. For those of you who have questions for our guest speaker, please write on the paper in your registration package and give it to one of our staff during the lecture. May we ask for your courtesy to refrain from using your mobile phones and other communication devices for the duration of the program. Thank you. ขอต้อนรับแขกผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านสู่จุฬาลงกรณ์มหาวิทยาลัยก่อนจะเริ่มรายการในวันนี้กระผมให้ขอชี้แจงกำหนดการของงานและรายละเอียดอื่นๆดังนี้รายการในวันนี้จะเริ่มเวลา 14 นาฬิกาและจะดำเนินไปโดยใช้ภาษาอังกฤษเป็นเวลาประมาณ 60 นาทีหลังจากจบการบรรยายเราจะมีช่วงเวลาสำหรับการถามตอบเป็นเวลา 15 นาทีท่านที่ต้องการถามคำถามกรุณาเขียนคำถามของท่านลงในกระดาษที่จัดไว้ให้ในเอกสารลงทะเบียนแล้วส่งให้เจ้าหน้าที่ของเราครับและเพื่อเป็นเกียรติแก่ผู้บรรยายของเราในวันนี้ขอความกรุณางดใช้โทรศัพท์มือถือหรือเครื่องมือสื่อสารอื่นๆตลอดรายการขอบคุณครับ Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the International Peace Foundation, Chulalongkorn University, and the Faculty of Commerce and Accounting are pleased to present to you a special lecture, Corporate Social Responsibility and Community Trade by Dame Anita Roddick. The talk is in the series, Bridges, Dialogues Towards Corporal Peace. Before we proceed to the main program, may I call upon the President of Chulalongkorn University, Associate Professor Dr. Chachai Schmidt, to give a welcome speech.
Anita Roddick, Mr. Morawetz, Chairman of the Board of Directors of the International Peace Foundation, Frida Yesuwan, President of ASEAN Thailand, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to welcome you all today on behalf of Chulalongkorn University to the lecture series entitled Bridges, Dialogues Towards the Culture of Peace. This lecture series was launched with the pressing awareness of the crucial notion of peace for nations, communities, and individuals that can be achieved not through war, but through dialogue and communication. For this reason, we are attempting to incorporate more meaningful discussion into our lives, not only to promote human security, but also to create a climate and culture of peace and understanding. We privilege not only the unique opportunity to meet the founder and co-chair of the world-renowned corporation, The Body Shop, Dame Anita Roddick, but to hear from her and to hear of her business acumen in creating an empire of 2,010 stores in 52 countries around the world. Nevertheless, we recognize the fact that sales margins and profits generated alone would certainly not have earned the respect and reputation that the body shop now enjoys. Thanks to the notions of business Anita Roddick has advocated, we now recognize that we exist in the greater context of a world that should respect the earth and all its citizens, man and animals alike. Today, we invite fellow members of the business circle and educators from multidisciplinary backgrounds to learn from the expertise and insight of a person who has devoted her entire career to achieve better quality of life, as well as to be one of the pioneers for corporate responsibility throughout the world. I would like to take this opportunity to express my sincere praise for the International Peace Foundation, which has helped make this wonderful series possible. Once again, may I thank our distinguished speaker for giving her time. I believe I can speak for all members of the audience when I say that we can certainly garner much from the perspective that our speaker is about to share and we are about to hear. Thank you very much.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, may I now request the honor of the Chairman of the Board of Directors of the International Peace Foundation, Mr. Uwe Morawetz, to deliver his remark.
Very sorry, but it's always difficult to choose the right language. And since I think there are more people, Thai people in the audience, please allow me to speak in Thai. สวัสดีครับแขกผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านผมไม่ขอเสนอทางแนวคิดเพื่อสันติและวิธีการที่จะได้มาซึ่งสันติภาพนั้นแต่ผมยังรู้สึกว่าสันติภาพเกิดขึ้นที่ใจและใจของผมก็ได้นำผมมาจากประเทศไทยในคณะนักเรียนในคณะที่ต้องการเรียนรู้เกี่ยวกับวัฒนธรรมใหม่โลกใหม่และแนวทางใหม่ที่จะก่อให้เกิดสันติผมมาประเทศไทยด้วยใจที่เปิดกว้างโดยปราศจากความคาดหวังใดๆผมใช้เวลาประมาณ2 ปีเดินทางไปยังหลายจังหวัดเพื่อที่จะรู้จักประเทศไทยไม่ใช่แต่กรุงเทพเท่านั้นหากรวมถึงการเรียนรู้วิถีชีวิตดั้งเดิมชีวิตชนบทและวัฒนธรรมอันล้ำลึกของชาวไซแลนด์ผมเดินทางตามแนวทางสายกลางโดยได้ศึกษาพระพุทธศาสนาที่วัดป่านาชาติและสำนักสงฆ์ในไทยผมได้ศึกษาธรรมะกับพระพิสารธรรมปฏิหรือพระพยอมกันแน่นอนทางพระธรรมปิฎกประยุทธ์โตและแม่ชีสันสนีผมต้องการจะเข้าใจถึงความยากแค้นของชาวสนามทั้งด้วยความคิดจิตใจและประสบการณ์ตรงผมได้คลุกคลีกับเด็กเร่ร่อนผู้ติดยาเสพติดและผู้รวยโลกเองและเพื่อที่จะเข้าใจถึงวัฒนธรรมของไทยให้ท่องแท้ผมได้เรียนภาษาไทยทั้งการพูดอ่านและเขียนผมติดต่อกับคนไทยด้วยภาษาไทยในวิถีไทยซึ่งมีลักษณะเฉพาะที่เปลี่ยนด้วยความเคารพใจเปิดกว้างความอ่อนร้อนอารมณ์ขันและสิ่งที่คาดเดาไม่ได้ผมได้เรียนรู้ว่าคนไทยมีวิธีการพิเศษที่จะสร้างและรักษาสัมพันธ์ที่จะยอมรับความแตกต่างแทนที่จะต่อต้านและยอมรับซึ่งกันและกันทั้งความเชื่อและศาสนาที่ต่างออกไป รวมทั้งสร้างโลกใบนี้ออกอันเป็นสีสันแห่งชีวิตผมได้ก้าวไปบนหนทางใหม่สู่สันติซึ่งผมเชื่อว่าคนทั้งหลายโดยเฉพาะชาวตะวันตกอาจเรียนรู้ได้มากจากสิ่งเหล่านี้ดังนั้นมูลนิธิสันติภาพนานาชาติจึงได้เรียนเชิญผู้ที่ได้รับรางวัลโนเบลจากสาขาต่างๆทั้งสาขาสันติภาพฟิสิกส์เคมีการแพทย์วรรณกรรมและเศรษฐศาสตร์ร่วม24 กันให้มาร่วมกันส่งเสริมให้ประเทศไทยเป็นศูนย์กลางแห่งสันติภาพการสื่อสารและความเข้าใจอันดีระหว่างประเทศเพื่อที่จะสร้างสถานสู่สันติเพื่อที่จะรับฟังและเรียนรู้ซึ่งกันและกันและค้นพบร่วมกันว่าเส้นทางสู่สันติไม่ได้มีเพียงเส้นทางเดียวเช่นที่รัฐบาลและผู้นำประเทศหลายๆคนดำเนินหากมีหลายเส้นทางซึ่งแน่นอนหลายเส้นทางนี้เราไม่ให้ผิดที่ใช่การมาก่อนเมื่อหลายเส้นทางหลากหลายมาประจบกันและผู้คนที่เกิดอยู่บนเส้นทางเหล่านี้ได้มาพบกันเมื่อนั้นก็จะเกิดความเข้าใจอันดีระหว่างประเทศและการแก้ไขปัญหาร่วมกันพลังสร้างสรรค์อันทวีคูณเป็นผลพวงจากความร่วมมือกันที่จึงเป็นเหตุผลที่มูลนิธิสันติภาพนานาชาติไม่ได้สร้างสถานสื่อสันติวัฒนธรรมเพียงลำพังแต่ได้ร่วมมือกับสถาบันอุตสาหกิจของไทยและนานาชาติรวม45 แห่งในนามของผู้สนับสนุนกิจกรรมสร้างสรรค์วันสื่อสันติวัฒนธรรมทั้งหมดผมขอขอบคุณจุฬาลงกรณ์มหาวิทยาลัยและธนาคารกสิกรไทยที่ได้ร่วมมือเป็นอย่างดียิ่งในการสร้างสถานเพื่อสร้างสรรค์วันสื่อสันติวัฒนธรรมให้ประสบผลสำเร็จทั้งในประเทศไทยและอย่างวงกว้างต่อไปนอกจากนี้ด้วยการจัดกิจกรรมครั้งนี้ทำให้ผมยังรู้สึกยินดีที่ได้มีโอกาสตอบแทนคนไทยซึ่งได้มอบของขวัญมากมายให้แก่ผมและทำให้จิตใจของผมไปด้วยความสุขและความตื่นเต้นผมขอขอบคุณทีมอันดูโรดิเป็นพิเศษที่กรุณาเดินทางมายังประเทศไทยได้ให้การสนับสนุนกิจกรรมนี้โดยไม่คิดค่าตอบแทนใดๆและต่อจากนี้ท่านจะกรุณามาแสดงบัตรกระดาษพิเศษอันเป็นส่วนสำคัญของการสร้างสรรค์สู่สันติวัฒนธรรมครับ
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are very honored to have Dame Anita Roddick today to talk to us about corporate social responsibility and community trade. Dame Anita Roddick is the founder and co-chair of The Body Shop. She has led the company to the forefront in the social responsibility movement. In addition, Dame Anita Roddick has committed to environment and animal protection, community trade, and respect for human rights. Such values are clearly passed on to the company. All of the body shops around the world are held together by the common philosophy, which is a strong foundation on which a thriving and successful international company has been built. Dame Anita Roddick strives to make a difference in business practices for the betterment of the community and environment. She has demonstrated that conscientious commerce has been a moral imperative and has brought the body shop on the cutting edge of competition. She received various honorary degrees and is the United Kingdom's ambassador for British business. She was named a Dame of the Order of the British Empire in 2003. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dame Anita Roddick.
You know, I often wonder what saved my soul in business. Business that alienates humanity in almost every way. Businesses that cause tension, cause wars, whether they be about oil or whether they will be about water. Businesses that provide nations and states and localities with arms. You see now big oil industries having their own armies. How was I protected? How did I come out in the business world with an entirely different viewpoint about how businesses should be run? Well, I think I know the answer, and it goes something like this. Number one, I never went to business school. Number two, I never read a book on economic theory. That helped. Never heard who Milton Friedman was. Never thought that life was any more complicated than love and work. Never believed in anything that other than everything in life was subject to change. And I guess finally, not believing that you should take a moisture cream seriously. Those were the sort of the attitudes, the naive attitudes, when I set up my company, and some 28 years ago. And I also say that what you bring to your company or your business or your enterprise or your livelihood is yourself. It's your DNA. It's and that's what we all are. We're all here together. You know, we could look at the whole geography of the map of our lives and the geography of our lives, and we're all imprinted on people who have affected you or places you've been. And I guess my geography, my map started, you know, being an immigrant child in, you know, the early 40s, 50s. And when you're an immigrant, you're never the same as anybody else. You know, you don't dance to the same drum beat. You're different. If you're an immigrant, you have a work ethic. If you're an immigrant, you don't see things in a different way. And every one of us who are immigrants, whether we're Jewish immigrants in Europe, or whether we're Italian immigrants in America, or Pakistani, or Indian immigrants in England, all of us are different, and we felt different as a child. And if we're lucky to have had teachers that shaped our consciousness, as I did, teachers who taught me about care, it's a very vital word. It's as strong as that other four-letter word called love. And when care comes through your system, everything is achievable. So having teachers that understood that, and teachers that directed me into a social justice environment. Made me read books by John Steinbeck. Made me read books by, John Dos Passos. Made me understand that the great writers, the social writers of the 30s, were also some of the great journalists who weren't being overpaid and talking about what movie star wore on the Oscars. They were tenacious about the injustices of what they were seeing, whether they were the farmers or whether there was industry. They wrote it as it was. They were rabble-rousers. They were myth breakers. They said it as it was. I was fed on that as a child. And when I got a scholarship to study in Israel, I got my first experience of community that is linked to the land. Understanding that what a community is, how it knows better than anybody, more than the state, more than the government, how to protect each other. So it isn't any wonder. I'm falling in love at a really early age with Joan of Arc. And she was a Christian saint that was fierce. She was a saint of non-conformity. She wore men's clothes. She had short hair and I had curly hair. And I wanted to have short hair like she had. She was fierce. So I read everything about her. So these were the aspects of shaping my identity. When I was 10 years old, my father died. The same week my father died, I opened up a book. It was the first paperback books in England in the early 50s. And it was the whole photographic evidence of the Holocaust, of Auschwitz. And that sort of kick-started me into passion, feeling alive, sense of empathy with the human condition. So it's no wonder that when I went on to a business stage, years and years later, I was going to do something different. And when I look back at business in my last 28 years, and I look at it as it is today, it's vastly different today than it was 28 years ago. Remember, it's at a sort of historical, is at a historical moment. It is so lauded. It's so sexy to be in business. It's so glamorous to be in business. You know, you're as high profile as pop stars and as movie stars. It's, you know, it's celebrated. It's seen as the great creator of jobs. It's the great technological advances. It's innovation. It's wealth. That's why it's good to be in business. That's why all our schools are training young children to be in business. To be in business at 10 years old. To have an enterprise culture at 8 years old. To force us into believing that the entire purpose of life is to consume. That's what's going on now. And I've looked at businesses and I think there's a dark side to it. I see businesses now as totally in control. They're in control. My government is an economic government. America is definitely an economic government. And I guess this government is an economic government too. So it measures itself by its economic standards, its economic growth, its economic advantages, its relationships, its strategic alliances, the economic way. Shaded and shaped and propelled by those huge global institutions. Politicians and business people, I believe, and I believe this so utterly sincerely, they will drive us off the edge. These global planning institutions, like the World Bank, like the IMF, and especially the World Trade, are ignoring this enormous mounting evidence that I see as I travel of this impending social catastrophe that leaves widespread and dangerous inequality and insecurity. That's what I'm seeing as I'm traveling. Now these institutions, the World Bank, the IMF, the World Trade Organization, GATS and NAFTA, MIA, they're not working for the majority of humanity. They certainly don't give a damn if you're poor. And they believe that they tell us that the roots of conflict are amongst those people, amongst the dispossessed, amongst the terrorists, amongst the poor. But they're not. The areas of, I believe, some of the areas of conflict that we found in these global planning institutions that lead them into retaliation. I believe as I travel consistently that the biggest social catastrophe we have there now, out there, today, at this moment, is poverty. Not only economic poverty, but poverty of imagination that doesn't give people the tools to get out of poverty, and spiritual poverty. That we don't give one damn that people, billions and billions of people, are in a slavery economy to make us healthy and wealthier, but certainly not wise. So it's depressing for me. It was depressing when I went to Seattle at the protest, the first global protest against the World Trade Organization. It was depressing to see that the world's economic leaders weren't listening to the indigenous people, weren't listening to the farmers, weren't listening to the unions, just were not interested. They were just wanting to do deals in big hotel rooms, doing deals with certain countries. That's what they were doing. It was depressing. But then sometimes something magical happens. And what's magical is, I believe, it says change. And, you know, it doesn't come about change in business. It won't come about done by our government. No way. It won't come about by businesses self-regulating, because they're not good at that stuff. I think it comes down to this little group of dissenters, these little group of sort of persistence of small committed groups of people who are willing to fail, consistently fail, over a long period of time, until that extraordinary, wonderful moment when this dam of oppression and indifference and greed finally cracks, and those in power finally accept that the world's people have been saying for all along that there has to be a revolution in business and in kindness. Things have got to be different. Being Italian makes me pathologically optimistic. And I'm saying that consistently because I eat a lot of tomatoes. And there's a serotonin in tomatoes that keeps you smiling. I don't think anybody's ever met a miserable Italian. They've met gay, very happy, they've met very stupid, they've met very self-absorbed, but they've never met a miserable Italian. And I put that down to tomatoes. So I'm going to be optimistic on this business agenda. I do see extraordinary practices going on, and I see movements being held, and I've been part of the sort of architecture for this new renaissance in social responsibility. Many businesses, many of them, many in America, many in Europe, were part of this sort of social movement, responsibility movement. And it sort of, I was introduced to this at the present time by a group of quite crazy people in America. They were called the Donuts. Donuts is an English cake, but dough means money and nuts means crazy. So people with a lot of money who were crazy. And they got together, and they were young, inherited wealth. There were people from progressive businesses like Ben & Jerry's, like The Body Shop. They were talking to the non-government organization and the foundations, and they sort of loosely got together a few years back, a decade or so back, and maybe 2 decades now. And they said, how do we make businesses kinder? How do we make it more considerate, more thoughtful? How do we bring in another agenda other than the ever-increasing number of profits or barrels of oil? And this isn't new, the social responsibility. It sort of goes back to Robert Owen in English history and the early cooperative movement. And the Quakers, what a wonderful group of people they were. Highly religious, but brilliant and Christian. Not but, and brilliant business people. They never lied. Can you believe that today in business, never lying? They never stole. Can you believe that today in business, never stealing? They never took out more money than they put back in. And they gave money to the community. They thanked the community for giving in its wealth. They built schools, they built villages, they built townships, the Quakers. And when we learned from the Amishes and the Shakers, these religious groups that got together just to survive and to live a way of life that wasn't shaped by Western or modern thinking. And these were the guiding principles of the social network that we have, the social responsibility. And all it's doing is trying to re-emerge in our sort of corporate consciousness. And I think many of us in business in those early days in the 70s would have rather slit our wrists than ever to be seen as corporate Americans or corporate, business people. We didn't believe that we were there just to be a financial scientists. We were traders. We were great at buying and selling, and that magical place where we sold our products. We had the zealousness of a religious convert, believing that business wasn't just financial science. It was where profit was the sole reason for being. It was more about participating in social and political activism, using products, using our lorries, our trucks, our windows, our clothes, our ice cream cones, as sort of ambassadors for social change, and leveraging our customers to come in and make a statement on social action. In short, for me, it was about bringing my activism to the workplace. Now, this isn't an easy movement. It is terrorized by the media who don't understand it and don't like it and try and force us into time capsules. And they take every word we say and they shape it. So you want to be an honest company, but are you it now? So you want to be honorable, but are you it now? So there's this whole terrorism of measurements that behests us. It's a very complex, it's a very paradoxical movement. Not least because the measurements are ill-defined. Is it simply just okay to practice good environmental housekeeping, to clean up your mess when you make a mess, to be kind to your employees, to care for the community you're in? Isn't that it? Isn't that enough? To be transparent about my finances as well? Have I got to do more than that? I say it's not necessarily enough. I think it's all of that and it's more. And the addition for me, as I'll study later, is the politics of consciousness. It's also about reaching out for other organizations, going into business schools, going into universities like today, and other corporations. And I'm not just talking about trading associations. I'm talking about the alternative trade federations, like the fair trade groups. I'm talking about the human rights groups. I'm talking about the coalition of churches. Amazing group in Canada, and now in America, and replicating itself in England, when they're bravely going and buying share prices or shares into large corporations and challenging the corporations and the annual general meeting. I'm talking about the cooperative movement, the Community Economic Development Act, it's independent think tanks coming out of universities, sometimes coming out of government, worse, but coming out of the human rights groups or the social justice movement. I'm talking about the trade justice movement as it is in England, philosophers, academic philosophers, politicians, political scientists, framing big questions, bigger questions, than how much more profit can I make. This informal democratic network, I believe it's this process of connection is absolutely vital to our ability to shape a deeper thoughtfulness, to frame those bigger questions. The big questions are these. How do you bring human fulfillment into the community of the workplace? How do you deal with the crisis of mass unemployment? Because businesses don't create jobs anymore. They create wealth for an ever-decreasing number of executives. They're not to own a business, is not to create jobs, unless potentially you might be in the retailing sector or the direct selling sector. How do you deal with this problem of social alienation with our youth? How do you deal with the stranglehold of the multinationals on our figure and our whole economy? And how do we measure ourselves against a different standard? Because what we need to know, all of us in these businesses that want to shape businesses differently, we need to know if we've made a difference. We feel businesses needs to respect communities and need to encourage countries to educate their kids. We need businesses to help countries heal their sick, value the work of women, and respect human rights. To listen to the wisdom of indigenous people. In short, to reclaim what is essentially being human. I don't believe businesses, when you look at the measurement now, it's this. The only accurate descriptor of the gross national product, said Ralph Nader, is the word growth. We need to measure progress by human development, not just gross national product. You hear so much about increased rates of growth in production, but you don't hear much about stronger communities or healthier children. You hear much about the march of progress, but you hear never anything about the creatures and the peoples you trampled underfoot. We hear a lot about productivity and efficiency, but nothing, absolutely nothing, about the creativity of the human spirit. Bearing all this in mind, I would like to take you on a little journey to show you how we translated this notion of social responsiveness and imprinting the values and facing the problems I've spoken about in our daily business practice. It was a crazy journey. It was experiment. It's exhausting, absolutely exhausting, trying to break down the barriers that they teach you about in business and traditional ways of working. When the traditional way of working was always hierarchical, when especially women's organizations and women-run businesses hated hierarchy, and entrepreneurs hate it even worse. I mean, entrepreneurs, I don't know how you study an entrepreneur, because you should study crazy people, because that's what we are. We have more in common with a crazy person. We vision. We can see things others don't. The only difference between us and a crazy person is that we can articulate it. We talk in the present tense about our ideas. We can't manage anything. We can't manage ourselves out of a paper bag. That's why we need somebody to take our ideas and to progress them and expedite them. We have a sense of social change in ourselves. I've never met one entrepreneur in my life that is obsessed with money or the accumulation of money or wealth. They're obsessed with seeing how far their idea can go. And they're outsiders, entrepreneurs. They have a work ethic. This is why immigrants are such brilliant entrepreneurs. It's hard to find an entrepreneur these days that comes from a wealthy background, is comfortable, and hasn't had this hunger for freedom, this hunger for a sense of identity. So I believe this is a journey where when I opened up the body shop, I had no belief that I was wanting to be part of a big business. It was only for 2 years until my husband came back from his horse ride from Argentina to New York. And then we were going to Australia to open up a pineapple plantation. So I'm a bit fortunate being here in a way because I had no vision for being a big business. In fact, being big was not of any interest to me. You know, once you're big, you're big. What was interesting to me is to be brave and to be different and to be vital and to be challenging, go in the opposite direction of everybody. The cosmetic industry, marketing groups, whatever they were doing, I wanted to do things differently. But when you work with this new thinking and it has a moral overtone to it, an ethical overtone, the best you can do is better than you ever imagined. And if progress is managed from the heart, great things in business can and will happen. But one thing remains absolutely clear for credibility and for reputation. You have to walk the talk. Rhetoric says nothing. Rhetoric says you walk the talk in everything you do. So here comes the big question for me. How can I integrate my behavior at work with my social values as a citizen in the larger world? And let me tell you by stages how I did this, and by the examples for the last 28 years. I sort of attempted to do business, that's what I did, use my business as a communication vehicle for change, for social change. And let me start with the word community. You know, it's very interesting. You can open up almost any management book and you will find words like total quality management, management by running in park, management by doing things faster, management by going to sleep, whatever management, management by warfare. You can see words like community, you can see words like progress, you know, words like identity, respect. You do not ever find the word community. Rarely do you find the word, ever do you find the word spirituality. You never find the word social justice or human rights in those lexicons of millions of management magazines and management books. But rarely do you find the word community, community as a spiritual engagement. So for me, work as community was one of the most important things I concentrated. It's a place where in my company, we have a commune or a co-op or whatever you like to call it, a campus with over 1,000 people working for a common good, with a common purpose. Now, how did I shape that community through other than being just a production time quality management, time quality management? And I think what I did that was very interesting, I realized it was no longer a family, it was too big to be a family. It was a community with a sort of a shared interest. And it was for not only just for the creation of a livelihood, we would have to go beyond that. And I had to bring in a sense of entertainment, a sense of wonderment and awe. And the first thing I dealt with was the aesthetics of the workplace. When I go into offices and when I go into universities and see nothing but bare walls, it drives me nuts. So I looked at what I could do with my work. For a start, I learned from other companies. I learned from Ben & Jerry's ice cream that they had the best tour in Vermont where they made their ice cream. And that people were going, thousands of people was going on the Ben & Jerry tour, mostly to get the free ice cream, but also to see how things worked. So I took from Ben, I said, I'm going to do the same with my company. And I'm going to have these Indonesian little buggies touring people around. And at its best, the Body Shop had nearly 180,000 people come a year to see how we manufactured, how we trained, how we observed, how we made our products. We even had the centre opened up by Prince Charles, and we had to drag every child in from the local schools because nobody was interested in seeing it. So there was our budget. And then when they went around the tour, and it had to be carnival, Ben Cohen said to me from Ben & Jerry's, make it a carnival, make it look like a carnival, because when you have a carnival, you have a carnival spirit, and then you have a carnival energy. And all these 180,000 a year visitors were waving to our employees, making fun with our employees, joking with them. And it didn't disrupt the workplace because they were observing. But it made the workplace a little more exciting than just playing pipe music. So if they went into our factory, they could see our work, some of our employees in the factory suspended on bananas. These were models, because most of the people in my company hate bananas, because we have, you know, tons and tons and tons of bananas coming in to be made into banana shampoo and banana conditioner. And there's not one machine that takes a banana peel from a banana. And these men used to have to peel thousands and thousands of bananas, millions of them, and have to separate the spines, so they hated it. So I immortalized the 3 or 4 men on putting them on these little bananas. And if you go into our offices, the first thing you see is an example of Degas' Journey sur l'air, which is a very famous impressionist art. We put it in fiberglass, right on that campus grass, and it gives a sense of fun, if nothing else. All over the company, there's quotes, there's affirmations, there's fun. Even on the car park, we have quotes from George Bernard Shaw saying, "I have hope for the human race when I see a man on a bicycle." And so I framed this community. I found that being part of a community of my company had always given me this unprecedented, in the early days, of opportunity to create a special place. In that place, service had to be honoured. Earlier in my life, I read a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, which said, when he defined spirituality as being in service to the weak and the frail. And I wanted service, not just the ability to serve customers well, but to work in poorer countries, bringing my staff into these war-torn zones and help. And that has been the best definition of spirituality I've ever come across in a workplace. The parent had to be served, children had to be protected. Most of my employees, most of them were under 27, female, and they wanted the job there. They loved the job. They were well paid. It was being educational. They were giving money every year. They were giving money called the Love Program, where they're allowed to spend it on anything they want, as long as it wasn't golf, and as long as it wasn't anything to do with being in business. Shaping a skill for business. If you wanted to go tightrope walking, if you wanted to learn swimming, French, the money was given to all our employees to do that. And that's what the first thing our employees said, protect our children. So what we did was we set up a child development centre in the workplace. This was very rare in England because Mrs. Thatcher, when we opened up our company, who I laughingly say, she had more testosterone than most of her cabinet, didn't want to see women work. And so the family was never protected. So we decided to open up a daycare and child development centre with 50 children from 5 months to 5 years and another 60 up to 12 years during the holidays. It humanised the workplace. It is the responsibility of the employees to help with the workers. And the most important thing, when we asked our workers, what can we do to shape your life, make it easier, they all said daycare centre, a child development centre. And so I believe that was one of the most important things that we did within our workplace. And it's a web of community. The idea that companies give back to their communities is as old as business itself. In the 16th century in England, Queen Elizabeth I said that any merchant that had the right to trade had to give a proportion of his money back to the community. So it's not news. We talked about the Quakers, we talked earlier on when I talked about the cooperative movement. Businesses, if they isolate themselves from the problems of the country or the community itself, I believe it's short-sighted. I believe we in retail had to protect the main streets, the high streets, and by doing that we had to help the back streets. So when I went into communities like some of the worst housing living communities in Western Europe, like Glasgow, where nobody was employed in it, this is a normal street 15 years ago in Glasgow, we decided to open up a soap factory right in the centre to employ over 120 people making these millions and millions of bars of soap. And they were going to get the best pay conditions and the best conditions any worker had, equal to the ones we were getting our own employees down south in England. And we were going to put 25% of all the profits we made from that factory into this community. First thing we did, we built an adventure playground for kids. We brought the army in, who were really good at doing adventure playgrounds, and we asked them to do that. Second thing, a drop-in centre for the elderly. Loneliness is the bleeding dilemma of our society at this moment. And I think any business, any product that shaves away loneliness is going to be a business or an enterprise that will last forever. So we've moved in Centre for the Lonely, the Elderly, work centres for young kids who weren't educated, teaching them the skills of massage and hairdressing, and it's paid back, you know, 1 million-fold. And so, for me, going back to into the back streets, and I haven't seen the dilemma here, it must be somewhere, of homeless people, and England, it was a national disaster. How many young, when Mrs. Thatcher closed the mental institutions, and many of the people were, you know, manic depressive or, you know, schizophrenic, were often out of the communities, out of the homes, into the communities. And a lot of them were ending up homeless. So we decided to set up a street newspaper sold by the homeless. So they got a percentage of the money, kept that money completely theirs. And it gave them, now it's got them off the streets, gave them a livelihood. Now we have 3,000 vendors in England selling, and many more around the world, where 1 million magazines, the big issue, is sold weekly in Europe. And this is in Leningrad now, this newspaper, and in Melbourne and various other countries. It works. It was a social enterprise. It is a social enterprise. You know, designed by my husband, the body shop, and handed over, because we aren't good at running newspapers, we're good at making cosmetics. So that was the big issue. They're the vendors. They're smart. They're entrepreneurial. They'll walk outside or stand outside a Harrods with their notices written in Japanese. And you know, it's to the delight to see an enterprise like this survive. So. Then the other thing that we do, because we never were very good at advertising, in fact we hardly spent 1 penny on national advertising. We have trucks, many trucks delivering our products to around the world, look, Europe, France and the UK. Nothing could be more boring than having Body Shop skin and hair care products on them. So they became our moving billboards. 12 of our trucks are allocated to missing children. So the missing young people on the side of the trucks, 75% of these children have been found. This girl was found down in the beach, right down in the south in Marseille, on a beach. A truck driver remembered her face because he had it emblazoned on his truck. Found her, she was drugged, she was being groomed for the sex industry. She'd been going into Albania and then into Eastern Europe. He found her, brought her back home. Celebration. This bonds you to the community. You know, not being or paying for another ad saying how wonderful your product is. This is the work of genius because it's guerrilla, it's so low cost, and any company that's got access to trucks should be doing this sort of stuff. We've had fun with politicians on this. We were so outraged by the Conservative government and every successive government, their attitude to education, thinking it was an investment. And you know, it was an expense, and it's an expense, it was too expensive, to cut costs. So we had a wonderful quote on the side of our trucks that said, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. And at the back we had the home phone number of the Minister of Education and his office number. So we became an irritant. Productivity is the human spirit. I mentioned that in the opening of the speech. And let me tell you a story of how I had a measurement of productivity of the human spirit. A member of our staff, after working some 3 weeks in an exhausted Romanian orphanage, other members of our staff, you know, working for human rights in our shops when we campaign for prisoners of conscience, when they come up to you and they put their hands on your shoulders, and they say to you, this is the real me. They're not going home dreaming of moisture creams or bubble baths. They're going home looking at their potential of power. Young people want a Monday to Friday living. They don't want a Monday to Friday death. They want to be part of a social experiment. They want to be able to change the way things. They want to be able to see their vision and their power in dreams and in music, not in the financial, you know, profit and loss sheets. And so taking many of our young staff and with us on these events like we have in Moldavia or in Romania, in Kosovo, Albania, and now Eastern Europe, I think it's been extraordinary. And I arrived in, this was set up, a charity we set up 12 years ago called Children on the Edge. And it was started by an accident. It started by me being invited to go and visit some of the appalling conditions in Romania after Ceausescu was assassinated. And I went and visited with some of the Médecins Sans Frontières people. I went into some of these castles in Romania, and they look like Walt Disney castles. They look really pretty from the outside. And then you knock on the door, you bang on the door, and when the door opens, this huge wave of species and decay and Europe, all this gagging. And as you go up the steps, you see things like this. You see children in cots that have probably not left a cot for 6 months, or just been once a week to get washed down or scrubbed down in conditions like this where they have hose pipes. Or they're incarcerated in cells underground. These are children that are so deformed, haven't even experienced human touch. And I saw what was going on in this crazy institutionalizing of kids, where thousands of kids, mothers were forced to have 4 or 5 children, whether they could afford them or not, for the army and for the mining industry. This is how mad some of these dictators are. And every child was inoculated. Every child at that stage had HIV and AIDS and died. Subsequently, all of those children I showed you about. So I came back and I said to my staff, I'm going to take a busload, 30 members of my company, anybody, volunteer. You get 2 months off from work, come and let's do something. And they came and they cleaned up the lavatories, they cleaned up the conditions, they made everything amazing, they played with the kids. But they realized this was only just token. What you have to do is stay there. So I took 3 of the young women who were with my staff and I said, do you want to be 5 at a body shop and run a charity? And here's a warehouse, here's a fax machine, here's some money, here's a telephone. Let's go and let's do something. 12 years later, Children on the Edge is one of the most respected charities in deinstitutionalizing children in Europe. Absolutely respected by the United Nations. This is allowing young people their power. And we still consider, and still work in these areas, like in Albania, where we take trucks, big trucks, which have shower units in them, some dozen shower units, where we go up and down the highway, and not only the highways, but the mountains of Albania. And people have been, just walking for months out of these war crises. We give them a shower, some freedom, some privacy, and also alongside it goes, the wrong way around. We're going the right way around this time. It's these little medical units. Rape is a strategy of war. Women are consistently raped as a strategy. So this does gynecological examinations and gunshot wounds. This now is in Chechnya, and so our trucks and our vehicles go everywhere. This is what business should be doing. If governments aren't doing this, somebody's got to do it. And we're the ones with the money. And we don't have to accumulate. Accumulation of wealth is a very, very, very new thing. People are now measured by how much they earn. You've got the rich list, you've got the Fortune 500 list, you've got the Sunday Times richest people in the UK. And it's a sort of a badge of respect, just being rich. But my whole thesis is we should give it away. To die rich, I think, is an obscenity. The stage of my life I'm at now is the joy of being able to give it away. To die rich is an obscenity. And working alongside great people with a vision, helping them, whether it's working for any peace initiative, as I do, or any initiative that deals with the great dilemmas of social alienation, or human rights, and trade justice, I'll work there. So we go into areas like this village, totally destroyed in Kosovo. It's called Chapra, it's a mountain village. And there where some 2,100 people live. And before the war, they had the best pedagogue, they had the best school, some of the best teachers. So we went back in and we rebuilt the school as a conflict resolution area, a community area, and a school. And it was amazing. And raising the money for things like this wasn't difficult. I had a really good chance because a very famous American actress, Melanie Griffiths, wanted to come and do some work with me in Albania. But she didn't, because she was a bit frightened. So she felt a little bit sheepish by her, you know, she was a bit scared. So I said to her, why don't I do a talk at your home? And why did you get all these famous, you know, movie stars to come? And she did. And we raised $250,000 for the school just on one conversation. So that was marked. We should call it the Antonio Banderas Million River School. But we also raised money from our shops and from our worldwide community of body shops. And now we're building another school in the Cirque area. So these sort of actions make me really proud of what we do. And I'd rather be measured by that than any other thing. I don't care how my share price goes up or down, in or out. It's vague. It's like life. You know, sometimes it's good. It's like marriage. Sometimes it's terrific. Sometimes it's rotten. But this is the thing that will indelibly stay in our minds of the people I'm employing. Travel is another area, you know. One of the things I think that gave my company my age is I got out of the chair, out of the office, and I moved. And I tend to move towards people that have a much clearer vision than myself, having an understanding and have insights. And every time I travel, I gather insights. And the insights I share, I accept, or I see, or I experience, because experiences change our values. I share. And whether it's that I'm going into, being invited to go into the Brazilian rainforest to stop the World Bank putting yet another Stalinist symbol of another hydroelectric dam, and forcing the Taipo Indians out of their job. Going in there and spending time working with the environmental groups, managing to get the dam stopped, but being invited into the community of the Taipo, which is really quite rare then, and it was quite scary because 20 years previous they would have, you know, cut your head off. So they invited me in, and they understood what was happening to their land. They understood. They didn't read, they didn't write. They understood the loggers were going in. Their primal forests were being destroyed for the logging industry. So they said, can we look for other ways of earning an income? So, you know, we can have the strength to keep the loggers out. So I spent about 3 weeks with the Taipo Indians, and it was a fascinating time. They have no notion of beauty. If you stood in front of them and said, paint me, they couldn't paint a face, and they couldn't paint a body, and they couldn't paint legs. They paint diametric patterns on your body, and that's the life story of a woman. And the patterns are different from a man, and the life story of a man. And they also have a belief that the forest can give you a baby. So they asked me if I'd like to have a forest baby. So I don't know, probably 10 years ago, I'd be my late 40s then. No, probably a bit older. And I said, yeah, I love a forest baby. So for three days I went into the forest with the shamans and the wise and the medicine men, and the Kaipo have amazing ethnobotanical knowledge. They know cures for everything. They know contraception. They know every plant and what it does. Hence the pharmaceutical industry is consistently going in like thieves, taking away their knowledge from them. So for 3 days I was in the middle of the rainforest and being hit on my back by these bunches of leaves, being wrapped around by vines. And after the 3rd day they said to me, as I was leaving the forest, you will have a female baby. Then I started to really worry, because the only babies I've ever had are female. So what wisdom did they have in this little plant that I didn't know about? So then I went back out of the village, and I said to the woman, I said, what have I just gone through? And they said, oh, don't worry about this. This is for the friends of many. Women in that Kaipo community, when they have they're called the friends of many, which means they have many lovers. And when they have a baby, and they don't want to say, you're the father of my child, they go into the forest, they go through the ritual I went through, and it becomes a forest baby, and the entire community loves it. So I learned how to have a forest baby there. And then they told me about Brazil nuts. They told me how they gather them, how they farm them, what trees that grow up against them to protect them. And as they said, they said they use it for their hair, and they use it to cook and to eat. And so the light came on my head when we could use this for some of our shampoos and conditioners. So So I bought an ICI, a very big pharmaceutical company, and I said, give me some good machinery to press oil, which they did, you see it here. And the Kayako gathered the nuts, pressed the oil, we bought it and put it into our products. And it worked, but it was terribly difficult because they moved their community every 2 years, and every 2 years you have to start again. And sometimes they would say, we don't want to gather any more Brazil nuts because it's too heavy, we'd rather go fishing. So there was never any more Brazil nut shampoo or conditioner. We paid 3 times the price of Brazil nut oil that was on the commodities market, and still, because you use so little oil in the shampoo, that makes sense, we could make a profit on the ship. So the line that says, when you buy these high prices for your labor, you lose out, is greed. It's greed. So we're still there. They now have a pharmaceutical little area called the Green Pharmacy. They treat with allopathic medicine, modern Western illnesses. They treat their own tribal illnesses with tribal medicine and green medicine. They have an internet cafe in town, which is making more money than they've ever seen before. They have a health clinic, they have schools, they have clean water. So for me, the answer is in giving them the tools to survive. A poor man shames us all. This is a quote from a Wadabe, which is a group of nomad tribe north of Niger. And they're quite remarkable, because they're the only group that have a male beauty pageant, and the women decide who are the most beautiful men. So you sit around them while they dance, and they sing, and they jump, and you measure their beauty by their eyes, and they're chattering with their teeth. They have no word for war in that community. So I learned that when I was in that community, when I gave them something, like we gave them some goats, everything is shared out in that community. They measure their greatness by how they welcome strangers. I look at my house, I've got a door that has a secret pad, everything is security. But they have a belief that their greatness is how you welcome strangers. A lot to be learned, and as I traveled, I realized the only thing I could do to bring values into my company, in my products, because they're shampoos and conditioners. They're not a matter of life and death. They're not the body and blood of Jesus Christ. They can be made anywhere, by anybody. How do you bring values into a shampoo or into a lotion? And the way I found it is community trade. This is just a purchasing program where we go cut out every middleman and we go straight to the community. And through thoughtfulness and a long process, we dialogue. We dialogue. It's like metaphorically taking tea. We sit down and we say, what is it that you've got that can grow for us and harvest for us that we can buy? What is it that you need? What is the money that you need for this? What does it work for you? Do you need a 10% extra addition which we will give you for social initiatives like schools? And it's a long process. And do you have a cooperative? We don't want to deal just with one person, we want to deal with the whole community. And I should say some of the 29 community trade projects we have around the world are not easy, like the Kayako Indians, but for me, the measurement of the success of the Body Shop is really is how many good community trade projects we have. And so I'll give you an example. Some 12 years ago, I went into Ghana. I was making a film with the BBC, and I went into these villages up in the north. And these villages all have these markets, and on these markets there's these huge blocks of waxy cooking fat, and that was shea butter. And they use that for their hair, they use that for their skin. And it is extraordinary on the skin. So I said to the women, do you have a notion and understanding of cooperative? And they do. They had only just started the cooperative because they used to buy together to take to the marketplaces. So then I decided, after spending a few weeks with them, after knowing and pounding and seeing the processes, that we could help them, we could buy from them. And it is quite fantastic, the cooperative movement that we've helped set up in northern Ghana. And when I go back and thank and they thank me. There's something quite remarkable because, you know, it's like life. You go in and you feel so happy when you're thanked. But when you see objects of desire, for them, I'm very famous in Ghana because I'm a lavatory. Because in their communities, all they have is Anita Roddick lavatories. So all the lavatories that are being constructed in these huge number of villages all have my name on. So you can't be egotistical when you go to Ghana. I'm famous for the lavatories. And this is another celebration. This is just trading. Trading isn't, as I said, financial science. It's going into the markets, getting women's story. Storytelling is the basis of education. In every country I've been to, it's about the myths and the legends of what makes you great and divine. It's the stories of what makes who you are. You lose your sense of storytelling, you lose your sense of self. I've always quoted the Celts, who are always the great storytellers, certainly around the area where I live. They said all teachers should be poets because knowledge, unless it goes through the heart, was dangerous. So, another example is India, Tamil Nadu, a very poor state where we worked with, helped set up an initiative called Teddy Exports. Teddy is the name of a little boy. It started by one of our employees who went to India, fell in love, stayed, had a child, and set up, Teddy Exports. And we went years ago and saw these workshops where all these wood-turning instruments. We said, we can do better than this. Let's have a sort of a compound, a campus where hundreds of people can work, making for us in the body shop these massage rollers, wooden footsie rollers. And the first thing they do when the money came in to them is build a Montessori school. Next thing, they have a veterinary clinic. Every community trade project has veterinary clinics. This community trade project in Chulalongkorn has treated 17,000 livestock last year. It has a Montessori school, it has a little bus that takes the children to school and back. It provides free uniforms, free lunch for the workers and for the school kids. The disabled children are brought into the school. Children from the matchbox factories are brought in the evening to be educated. Women who work in the school go in and teach women in the sex industry and other professions. They have the best HIV and AIDS awareness program attached to the garages, all out of one community trade project. This isn't about accumulating the money to build a bigger home or find a palace. This is about where the community looks after itself, as I said in the beginning. And what we do with it, we emblazon it on our trucks. That says in Ghana they built a well without cocoa butter. This is the interaction that I think that many businesses love. This is the lack of imagination. When I've been for years trying to get Avon Cosmetics to work with us, with our Nicaraguan farmers, who grow sesame oil, which is wonderful on the skin. And Avon is so enormous, and so brilliant in many ways. And yet it just doesn't get that purchasing, honourable purchasing, giving the right amount of money for the right value of the product or the ingredient works. Now, I'm going to give you a sort of a terrible series of slides that I hope will shake you. This is a photograph that was taken last year when I was in Nigeria. This is in Ogoni land. This is where 500,000 unrepresented people live, the Ogoni people. They're the nation's writers, teachers, educators. They're the most intelligent tribe or group in Nigeria. Unfortunately, in early 1950s, unfortunately, oil was discovered. So, since the mid-early 50s to now, billions of barrels of oil have been extracted, billions of dollars have been made for the major oil companies, nominally, majorly, Shell. Not one penny has been put in to clean up its mess, not one. So here you go, this is just an ordinary well, this is an ordinary swamp in an ordinary village today in Ogoni land. Or you can see this one here. This is when we were invited years ago by Ken Saro-Wiwa, who was a political activist, an environmentalist. And when he returned, very famous for a challenging shell and a Nigerian government which was then a dictatorship. And he came to see us at the body shop and he said, support us whatever we do. And in prison he wrote to us. And we, from every shop around the world, writing letters, campaigning on his behalf, we allowed our staff to picket outside the Nigerian embassy at a manager's meeting, or outside the building. We turned our shops into action stations, and I'll show you later. This is another photograph of what goes on in Nigeria. This is a photograph of a school, an ordinary school today, last year in Nigeria, where the kids made their own desks and write the letters, which you can't see, on the wall because there's no paper or pencil. Not one penny has gone back from the billions of dollars for the shareholders of Shell and the Nigerian government that then takes it away and hides it to tax havens somewhere in the world. I don't know about you, I take this personally. This makes me mad. This is a hospital. This is the operating theatre. Some 15,000 that go in. There is a refrigerator with some syringes in it that was bought for twice the price out of the Shell Hospital. This is where women have cesareans with no anaesthetic. And we're proud of companies for raising their profile and their profits. This is where I think somehow things have gone askew. We've got to stop legitimizing greed in business. We've got to have a corporate code of governance with teeth. This should be against the law. There should be many things that business do that should be stopped. Too many criminal activities are going on with the big multi-corporate businesses that we just put a blind eye to. We turned our shops to action stations. This is a shop in America. The back room, through graphics and illustration, fax machines, telephones, all our customers would come in and make a point. This isn't cause-related marketing. This has nothing to do with marketing a product. This is marketing the human spirit. This is giving people access to information, what governments should do, what the media should be doing. This is what makes people want to stay with us. And then we turned another truck. This was just before Ken Saro-Wiwa died. And so they become political billboards as well. This is probably the most dangerous part, because I don't recommend any company ever follows this course. This is what separates us from everybody. When we start talking about challenging another company. You know, it's very easy to hug a bunny rabbit. It's easy to do good work with little babies, do stuff, good stuff. And I'm not demeaning that. But it's almost impossible to challenge another company in business on its moral behavior. You challenge it on its market share, you challenge it on its marketing practices, but it's very rare that you challenge somebody or another company, as we challenge Shell or Union Carbide, as we challenge, ExxonMobil, and we don't have friends in this because most companies are petrified of doing this. But what we do find is that what we're doing is relating ourselves and sort of getting a better relationship with the non-government organizations. And I believe any company worth its salt now should have on its board, or an advisor to its board or executive committee, members of the non-government organization movement. I remember this has been the most exciting movement that I've experienced in the last 20 years. Community trade for me is is a light at the end of the tunnel against poverty. And also taking the money that you make and supporting any grassroots group that are doing good jobs, as we do with our Human Rights Award, which is given every 2 years. We go into these toxic waste dumps. This is in the Philippines, another one in Managua, in Nicaragua. These are kids, 700 kids are on this dump, this toxic waste dump, working, finding anything they can sell. And we look for groups that are educating them and fund them. Just always going down to the grassroots. Because leadership no longer is in the political system, rarely is it in the business now. You see the grassroots, the leadership, the true spiritual leadership, I believe, is in the grassroots. And I believe too that the surge of child labour, there is nowhere that the public is more outraged on this issue of child labour. People know that kids are being sort of bought and sold as slaves. They have the public display an enormous outrage when they see pictures like I'm showing you. We know that children are used in sweatshop labour. We know they're bought and sold. They are sometimes tortured. They're confined in the workplace. And they do never ever complain. They're sold in the sexual cargo for the sex industry, and especially the dark side of the tourist industry. And I believe now that what we've got to do is measure our country's wealth by how it treats its children. And there's always arguments with children working, and then there's no argument I have against that, but I get so tired when I say it's the culture to do this. How is it if I put my grandchildren in the conditions that this child is working in? If I take my 5-year-old grandchild, and this is Burma, this is a child of bonded labour, whether it's farm labour or domestic labour, we're outraged. I'd be sent to prison. But we so accept this in the West, for our lifestyle. We kind of turn a blind eye. This should be banned. This isn't about creating a job, this is about greed of the system. That where our economic values have overridden every other human value, joy, compassion, kindness, care. It's gone. We measure everything by its economic worth. How much you worth. Economic values, even our language has economic overtones to it. Corporate social responsibility has an enormous role to play in this. What we've got to do, I believe, is start finding examples, real examples, and looking for any organisation, any business that has a proximate solution to these problems. Because we cannot be, people are getting so tired of the bad news in business. So anybody out there that is doing something with media should praise from the rooftop. And this is where the media should come in and don't. Financial journalists who mostly can't add up and mostly can't write are not interested in this revolutionary thinking. And yet the media should be behind us with our ways of trying to reshape businesses as part of the human spirit rather than anything else. And the dilemma really is the social responsibilities of fascism within the financial world. One of the big dilemmas is one of the big mistakes I made is going onto the stock market. It doesn't give any time for reflection on the stock market. It doesn't give you any time for experimentation. It doesn't allow you to say, I'm not going to open up any more shops this year, I just want to have more fun with my employees. Tell them that. It's just too driven by one measurement, which is profit and loss. And in a business, it is more than this. Like the business of life, it's not just breathing, it's more than that. If you just concentrated on your breathing, you would be a deeply dull person. You just concentrate on maximizing your profit, you would not only be a deeply dull corporation, but you could end up being criminal in your activities because maximizing profit becomes your modus operandi. So until we can change that, until we have some laws that change the demands of the financial services, there should be a law, I believe, that says you want to go onto these financial markets, you want to go onto the stock market, you want to go onto Wall Street, then you have to have certain considerations. You have to be audited, which you are financially, but you should be audited for your environmental management, you should be audited for your human rights management, for your social justice. You should be banned from going on the stock market if you start doing things in a mischievous and disingenuous way. You should just plainly be banned. We should ban products coming into our country if they have even the smell of sweatshop labor or child slavery attached to it. We should be so outraged at this that we should be a movement as strong as the civil rights movement in America. Trade justice, workers' justice should be our rallying cry. But we have to start helping these CEOs that only measure their work by the success of the share price. And social responsibility doesn't seem to be able to stand up against the demands of the markets. Because every time what the stock market rewards is the sort of toughness, downsizing. Oh, Sears is doing a great job, they just fired 30,000 people. That's a good business move. They're rewarded for cost cutting, they don't reward ethical behavior. I've never got one tax break for being good to my employees, and neither would anyone of you here who's working in this. or for any imaginative social responsibility. Quite the reverse, is more often ridiculed in major investment magazines like Forbes and Fortune. So schizophrenia remains. Corporate boardrooms will sort of take on moral decisions if they do not attempt to touch the central task of the company. I believe ethics are irrelevant when they do. And we have to go further than that. I think corporate social responsibility is simply not going to develop into anything worthwhile unless there is the reform of this financial system. So the bold, wonderful ethical experiments do not actually make things worse for the companies that are trying it out, as more often they do. I believe most companies that are trying to do ethical things, social responsibility, are mostly challenged by the media and not applauded by the media. So what I believe we've got to do, more than anything, is we've got to prepare to look for any company that's doing the things, and we have to shout at the top. For universities like this should be consistently bringing in organizations which have real innovation in them, not just technical innovation, but innovation of the human spirit, redefining the language of business, because this is going to be the future. And I believe that we have to show that business can show more developed emotions than fear and greed. And that for the thousands of people working in marketing or in creative services, maybe, just maybe, they can take their God-given skills and to try and to find some solutions, some creative solutions to these social problems. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean Anita Roddick, for sharing your experience and insight on the issues of corporate social responsibility.
Can I stand up? I've never sat down so long in my life. Thank you very much.
We have received one question at this time. If you have more questions, please pass your question on to our staff who are collecting your questions. And here's the first question to you, Dean Anita Roddick. Given that we have so many businesses selling cosmetic products, would it not be more efficient use of human resources to instead encourage the more workforce to pursue other socially beneficial careers?
I think that's a stupid question. Am I allowed to say stupid? Because the dilemma isn't something as, benign as cosmetics. It's, should we do some charity, the armaments industry? I mean, cosmetics aren't going to change the world, let me tell you, they're just playful and nice. And, if we could get any of the cosmetic companies to like women for a start, that would help, because the cosmetic industry hates women. They certainly hate women my age. They're always trying to sell you something on how awful you look. So maybe what we should do is change their thinking. But the cosmetic companies are not the devil. Unfortunately, I wish they were, because I could have more fun there. They're the petrochemical industry, it's the oil industry, oil oligarchy, it's the drug industry. They're the enemies within. They're the big company. If you want an enemy, I'll give you Walmart. That's one to challenge. So I'm going to be protective of the cosmetic industry. And I think they're doing okay. They're just dull as ditch water because they're run by men, which just makes it even duller in a way.
Speaking as an animal lover myself, I am absolutely heartbroken to see stories of dogs and cats roaming the streets of Bangkok, hungry, tired, and sick. At my home, I try to take in as many as possible, but of course, that doesn't help. Do you ever think some kind of project would be started up that could help these poor creatures to have a better life? A project that might really work. I think it's important to remember that suffering is felt by all God's creatures, not just humans.
Of course they should. Don't you have a sort of an organisation in Thailand that protects animals? No, not like the RSPCA in England. Well, I could agree with that. Of course they should. I think hurting any living vertebrate for something as irrelevant as cosmetics, I think is heinous and wrong. I think trading animal parts for aphrodisiacs is wrong. I find incarcerating animals in zoo is not the act of intelligence. I think lots of things, but I'm not. I'm asking you a question. The question you posed wrote me is there no protection of our wild animals in this country? And there should be. There isn't. I think it would be a great thing for people to start up.
Here's the third question. How do you instill the corporate social responsibility culture in your staff?
You live it. It's like, for a start, you have fun how I run it was, there's a French expression called laisser le geste, which means you make fun of the leaders. So everything was, we were made fun of. We allowed ourselves to be made fun of. We were like a family in many ways. I was always challenging the staff to write to my husband that he was so boring, he had to do things in a funnier way. So it was all that, there was that freedom. I was always on the grassroots. I was with the truck drivers, spending time delivering cosmetics or the orders to the shops to understand what it's like to be in the shop at 7:30 in the morning to gather all these products when they were, every week that they were being supplied. I'm a grassroots person. Cutting down hierarchy was the most important thing. And I think that one of the most important things when a company gets bigger is what you lose is intimacy. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and hierarchy rises, rules and regulations are starting to put in place, and creativity is snuffed out. So anything you can do to destroy hierarchy, I think would be working well. Number thing is sort of the aesthetics of the workplace. Number two, you live your talk. We used education as a really strong means. We used to do a lot of lectures at lunchtime, bringing in politicians, bringing in theologians, bringing in activists, talking to our staff about the work they do. So it became a sort of an education retreat. We even had dumb things like drumming lessons. I can't tell you, that was a mistake I really made. Drumming lessons at lunchtime at work. But we used to bring musicians to come in to our company and play violin around the offices. And that was a sense that everything created is possible. Number two, you've got to let your staff to really control and ride the mission of the company, not get a PR agency to say this is what we're about. We changed from the day one we went to the Body Shop when we went on the public stock market. We legally dedicated our company to the pursuit of social and environmental change and human rights advocacy. This is the legal document of the purpose of being in the Body Shop. 70% of our shareholders will have to get together to vote it out if they so want to. So that's legally embedded in our rules and regulations of our company.
What do you think when some people claim that social responsibility is some kind of social marketing?
I think they're cynical, and I think the problem with cynics is that they seem to have this air that they have insight. And there's actually lack of moral courage. I think any idea that even if it's just talk at this moment, at least language creates the thinking behind the action. And I've learned that sometimes a revolution in thinking could take 2 decades. But at least what we've got is the language for behavior and action. We don't have the actions yet. And it is used a lot as greenwashing. But people are so smart. You just get onto the internet and you see these thousands of billions of dollars of advertising. In the old days, Shell did to talk. It's like it was written by the angels. It was such a perfect company. You get onto their website and you find the reality. So companies can't hide behind their advertising speak now. Just look at the dilemma Coca-Cola was going through. This happy, Coca-Cola, and we're all singing the song and running the world, and everything was happy and perfect. Amazing social reputation management they're going through in countries like India, in the taking of water. Everywhere you go, there's organizations coming up challenging the role of Coca-Cola, especially in the Far East and in India. I mean, that's I believe how truth is found out.
How do you think the education system should change?
Drastically. I think we should stop educating children to perform on a business analysis. We're auditing, we're checking children too early on in life. We're giving business standards for education. We're filling them with facts. We're not teaching them compassion. We're not teaching them wonderment. We're not teaching them social justice. We're not teaching them anything about the ability to be a passive employee. We're not teaching them to stand out, challenge the system, keep their minds open. We don't do debate, we're timid. Timidity is the modus operandi now in most schools. So I think there should be, it must be a different way of doing education, certainly the more like the Montessori schools or some of the others, the human scale education. People are now leaving the education system in droves in England because it's all assessment. Even 5-year-old children are being assessed. Instead of being looked at to see if they're gregarious and social, they're being assessed. Even teachers are getting tired of the assessment process. Police force are getting tired of being assessed. All of these are business standards that are going on in schools. And now business is being taken, education is being corralled, being taken over by schools. You just by businesses are being taken over, schools are being taken over by business. You go to America, all the research projects, the big research projects are coming from multinational corporations. And so knowledge is no longer free. Knowledge goes right back, the research paid to the university goes right back to the benefit of the company. And that is very, very scary.
How can we apply corporate social responsibility to the very cost-oriented industry, such as commodity products?
I have no idea. I just think these things are not made in nature. I think they're not deemed by God or God, they're made by men and women so they can be changed. I think maybe the real cost of something, the environmental cost and the social cost should be included in almost everything. The real cost of a business never measures the water. This is our life-affirming system. And yet it's being stolen under our eyes by this mania, this absolute obsession with privatization. This is the worst thing that is happening, certainly has happened in my country. They privatize the railway and it's a disaster. They're privatizing everything. They privatize the waterways and it's a disaster. So if you've got any politicians obsessed with privatization, challenge it. It just doesn't work. It just means money, just challenge it.
We have time for one more question only. How do you measure your success and how do you measure the success of the body shop?
Well, I think success changes. In the early days I measured it by how many people I employed or I survived. My husband said before I left, he left for South America, he said, you have to take £300 a week, $500, and then you'll be okay. That's my entire financial understanding. And so I measured by survival, I measured by